Certainly. Here is a deeply rephrased, concise, and polished version of your original text, approximately 20% shorter, with a smooth flow and clear structure. We want to take a moment to introduce you to our incredible sponsor, the Ridge. I have been using Ridge wallets for years and truly love them. They are sleek and stylish, yet capable of holding up to 12 cards along with cash. Many times when I pay with my wallet, I receive compliments on its design. Ridge wallets are simply superior to bulky leather alternatives, combining practicality with modern elegance. They make excellent gifts, especially for Father's Day, offering over 30 styles and colors to choose from, ensuring you find something special for your father figure, or the father of your children. These wallets are remarkably durable and come with a lifetime warranty, making it possible to gift someone a daily companion they'll cherish for life. If that isn't a thoughtful present, I don't know what is. Currently, Ridge offers a special deal for viewers by visiting ridge.com, where you can save money and enjoy free worldwide shipping and returns. Help your dad upgrade from a bulky wallet this Father's Day and give him a modern, functional accessory he'll use every day. Kenny Fox was born in February of 1973 and grew up in Lexington, Tennessee. Known as a mischievous child and the class clown, he played football in high school. At 18, Kenny married his high school sweetheart, Diana Renee Moore, and together they had 3 sons, Michael, Dylan, and Ethan. Kenny was a proud father who loved watching his boys play football. By spring of 2012, Kenny, aged 39, served as fire chief for the volunteer firefighters in Decatur County, Tennessee, and also worked as a sheriff's deputy. In his free time, he volunteered with underprivileged youth. His eldest son, Michael, 19, was also a volunteer firefighter, while Dylan was 14 and Ethan was just 22 months old. Early on the morning of April 12, 2012, a fire erupted at the Oak Hill Cafe, Bar and Grill in Decatur County. Kenny and his son Michael responded to the scene as firefighters, along with 2 brothers, Randy and Jeremy Inman. During the rescue, the building's roof began to collapse, threatening Randy and Jeremy. Kenny heroically pushed them out of harm's way, sustaining injuries himself. Tragically, Michael entered the burning building in an attempt to save his father, but was unable to reach him. Instead, he waited until his father's body was recovered from the wreckage. Kenny was celebrated as a hero because his final act saved the lives of Randy and Jeremy. His funeral drew over 1,000 attendees. Later, investigations revealed that the fire was arson, making Kenny's death a murder. Despite over 9 years passing, authorities remain clueless about who started the fire, hoping that a tip will lead to an arrest. This version preserves all key details and emotional nuances while improving readability, flow, and conciseness. In $25,000, a reward was offered for information leading to an arrest. Yet, without a tip, the case might remain unsolved indefinitely. In 2012, 9-year-old Chloe Leverette and her 7-year-old half-brother, Christopher Daniel, known as Gage, lived with their maternal grandmother, 70-year-old Molly McLaren, and her 72-year-old husband, Leon Bubba McLaren. Their home was a single-story, 4-bedroom ranch in Unionville, Tennessee. On the evening of September 23rd, around 6:30 p.m., a neighbor saw Chloe playing in the yard. About 3 hours later, another neighbor noticed that the McLaren house was engulfed in flames. The house was packed with belongings, fueling an intense fire that raged into the early morning hours. It appeared that no one had escaped safely. After the blaze was extinguished, investigators scoured the debris. The remains of Bubba and Molly were discovered in the basement, seemingly in their beds when the fire started, with the floor collapsing beneath them. However, there was no sign of Chloe or Gage's bodies among the wreckage. The obvious assumption was that they had perished in the fire, incinerated beyond recognition. Yet, experts explained that complete cremation of a body within a house fire is virtually impossible. Even in crematoria, bones and teeth typically remain intact, and bone fragments are usually found. Despite the intensity of the blaze, investigators recovered remains of a pet poodle and a cockatoo, along with food remnants. If Chloe and Gage had been in the house, at least some bone fragments or teeth should have been present. But multiple experts examining the site found no evidence that either child had been inside during the fire. Authorities hoped the children had escaped before the flames grew deadly and were nearby, safe. They deployed helicopters, infrared cameras, and search dogs to comb the surrounding area, but no trace of Chloe or Gage was found. Chloe's mother, Cheryl, was questioned about her children's whereabouts. She denied knowing where they were, prompting police to administer a polygraph test, which she passed. Her cooperation led to the issuance of an Amber Alert on September 28th, 5 days after the fire. The investigation received assistance from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, who examined the scene for signs of arson. They discovered roughly 30 propane tanks in the basement, some decades old. The ATF could neither confirm nor rule out whether the tanks had ignited the fire, and ultimately they could not determine if the blaze was accidental or deliberate. The case remains open. The family believed Bubba and Molly would have fought to protect their grandchildren, leading them to suspect that the elderly couple had been murdered, and the perpetrator had taken Chloe and Gage out of the house before setting it ablaze to destroy evidence. Additionally, something else was missing from the scene: a safe containing Bubba and Molly's wills. The documents had been altered a month or two before the fire, designating Chloe and Gage as the sole heirs. The new will had gone missing, so the older version was used to settle the estate. Daniel, Chloe's stepfather, suspects that someone close to the family murdered Bubba and Molly, and then kidnapped the children. There have been numerous unverified sightings of Chloe across the United States and even in Costa Rica. According to the Unsolved Mysteries podcast, one promising lead emerged when, a few months after the fire, a woman in a Tennessee restaurant believed she saw a girl resembling Chloe. Convinced it was her, she took several photos and sent them to investigators. In February of 2013, authorities showed the images to Cheryl, hoping for confirmation. She was convinced that her daughter was still alive. The police visited the restaurant where the girl and her companions had been seen, but by the time they arrived, tracking them down proved impossible. The group had been passing through town, paying for their meal in cash, and the restaurant lacked surveillance cameras. Cheryl Daniel firmly believes that Chloe and Gage are alive. Before their disappearance, she had struggled with drug addiction, but since the fire, she has remained sober, determined to be the best mother possible. In September of 2020, age progression images of Chloe and Gage were released. Chloe's birthday falls within a week of Gage's in June. If they are still alive today, Chloe would be nearly 18, and Gage almost 16. The first story involves the Walkers and the Schoensteins. The Walker family resided in a spacious ranch-style home in Clayton, California. Richard Walker, a successful contractor, had a daughter from a previous marriage named Linda, who was 12. His wife, Carol, had 3 children from her prior relationship: 13-year-old Cynthia, 9-year-old Carlton, and 6-year-old Caroline. Together, Richard and Carol had 2 more children, 4-year-old Theodore and 6-month-old Mary Ann. Richard was a prominent builder, while Carol was a homemaker. All 6 children lived together in the same house. On the night of September 7th, 1968, Richard and Carol attended a fundraiser for a local hospital, leaving their children at home. Sometime after 1 in the morning, neighbor Dale Ross noticed their house was on fire. 9-year-old Carlton and 6-year-old Caroline were desperately banging on a window. Ross rushed over, broke the window, and managed to rescue the children. Carlton, however, shouted that he needed to go back inside for his baby sister, Mary Ann. Ross tried to follow him into the flames, but was thwarted by the intensity of the fire. Tragically, Carlton never emerged. Meanwhile, another neighbor called the fire department, which arrived shortly thereafter. Richard and Carol returned home to see their house engulfed in 60-foot flames, with firefighters struggling to contain the blaze. During the search of the wreckage, authorities recovered the bodies of 5 children. Carlton's body was found beside the crib, with Mary Ann in his arms. All victims had died from smoke inhalation, some with burns. The tragedy was devastating, but questions arose. Was it an accident or arson? A few weeks later, investigators announced that the fire had been deliberately set. Prior to ignition, an accelerant had been poured onto the living room carpet, and someone had thrown an explosive device into the house. In the spring of 1986, a 33-year-old man named John Sapp was arrested in Grass Valley, California, for possessing a concealed firearm, an offense that marked the beginning of his startling confessions. Sapp was a convicted felon, having previously served 2 years in prison after pleading no contest to arson charges stemming from a house fire he set in Richmond, California, in January of 1981. The fire had destroyed his ex-girlfriend's home, and shortly afterward, in late December of 1980, she vanished without a trace. Despite being a suspect in her disappearance, authorities lacked concrete evidence linking Sapp to her case. The day after his arrest for the firearm violation, Sapp began revealing details of his past crimes. His first confessed murder occurred more than 10 years earlier, on December 22, 1975, when he was 26 and living in Concord, California. He described a friendship with a 22-year-old named John Nabano, a marijuana dealer and heroin addict. Sapp claimed that Nabano's reckless drug dealings made him angry, prompting him to kill him. He took Nabano to a remote area in Lime Ridge open space, shot him multiple times in the head, initially covering the body with brush. A few days later, Sapp returned to bury him. Sapp's second murder, he confessed, took place 5 years later, involving his ex-girlfriend Elizabeth Duarte, then 24. They had been together for several years but had recently broken up. Sapp described their relationship as tumultuous, with Duarte allegedly hiring a hitman to shoot up his house. He claimed that he decided to kill her after being offered $10,000 by her new boyfriend, whom he paid to lure her to his house. Sapp recounted that when Duarte arrived, he struck her hard enough to cause a skull fracture. then wrapped her head with a bandage and covered her with a blanket. He drove her to Lime Ridge, where he asserted she was still conscious, and they talked through the night. Later, he shot her in the stomach and, at her urging, fired multiple rounds into her body. He then wrapped her in a blanket and buried her. Sapp's confessions did not end there. He also admitted to a third murder, which he claimed occurred in mid-August of 1985. Although the details of this crime are less elaborated, his admissions painted a chilling picture of a man responsible for multiple homicides over a span of years. In August of 1985, a low-level drug dealer named Robert Weber was tragically shot and killed. Weber, a 35-year-old resident of Concord, California, owed money to several drug traffickers, including a man named John Sapp. On the night of August 13th, Weber informed his girlfriend that he and Sapp were heading out of town to purchase drugs from an unknown source. He took along multiple firearms and $17,000 in cash. That evening, Weber called his girlfriend to say the seller never appeared, and after that, she lost contact with him. A few days later, on August 18th, hunters discovered Weber's body on Walker Ridge in Higasa County, California. He had been shot multiple times, marking a brutal end to his life. These murders and disappearances were not isolated incidents linked solely to Weber. In fact, John Sapp was connected to several other violent crimes. Earlier that year, on June 5, 1985, Sapp's mother, Geraldine Sapp, age 63, vanished without a trace. At the time, Sapp was living with her in Oroville, California. Between October of 1984 and March of 1985, Geraldine had withdrawn over $60,000 from her bank account. She claimed this money was for a business venture with her son, John. However, she also confided to another son and daughter that John was using the funds for an antiques deal. Sapp told police he did not kill his mother but claimed he had learned that a man involved in the drug trade had murdered her because she had become inquisitive about his activities. According to Sapp, he and this man had kidnapped the individual, taken him out onto San Francisco Bay on a boat, and obtained a confession. Sapp then shot the man and disposed of his body in the bay. Later, he led authorities to the burial sites of his mother, Geraldine, as well as two other victims, Gianna Bono and Elizabeth Duarte. Bono's body was discovered wrapped in a blanket with a bandage around her head, and she had been shot multiple times. Geraldine Sapp's remains showed signs of death by a blow to the head. The whereabouts of John Bono, however, remained unknown. Sapp was ultimately charged with the murders of Bono, Duarte, and Weber, but not with his mother's death, as prosecutors believed there was insufficient evidence to convict him of that crime. In 1991, 5 years after his confession, Sapp stood trial for the 3 murders. After a 15-hour deliberation, the jury found him guilty on June 21st. A few months later, in October, he was sentenced to death and sent to spend his remaining days on death row at San Quentin Prison. But why is John Sapp also suspected of setting the fire that claimed the lives of the Walker family and the Schoensteins? At the time of the blaze, Sapp was just 15 years old and lived within walking distance of the crime scene. He had recently been released from juvenile hall. The judge who sentenced him to juvenile detention lived only a few doors down from the Walker and Schoenstein residences. Authorities believed that Sapp intended to burn down the judge's house, but mistakenly set fire to the Walker family's home instead. John Sapp, a man now facing the ultimate punishment, has repeatedly denied any involvement in the deadly fire that led to his current predicament. At 68 years old, he sits on death row at San Quentin Prison in California, maintaining his innocence. If he indeed was responsible for the murders of the Walkers and the Schoensteins, his estimated victim count would be 9. However, law enforcement suspects that his actions may have resulted in even more fatalities, though the true number may never be known. The exact toll of his alleged crimes remains uncertain, leaving a shadow of doubt over how many lives he may have taken. Thank you for engaging with today's story. For more in-depth analysis, consider listening to our latest podcast episode, Into the Killing, which explores the case of the boy featured on the milk carton, Eitan Pides. You can find this episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. That's all for now. We appreciate your attention.